Okay, we're just giving it a few minutes, so we're on a little bit early. Good morning, everybody. Hope everyone's doing well. It's a little chilly this morning, so I was not prepared, but I know it's going to heat back up soon. So thank you for your patience as we're kind of figuring this out as we always do. There we go. Perfect. All right. So now it's up there. Now I see it, which is great. So again, I hope everybody's doing well. So let's see, birding updates. It's really slow right now in the Carolinas in regards to the bird feeding action that we're seeing at the feeders. There's a lot of natural food right now. It's also a mast year for acorns. So, a lot of wildlife, especially squirrels too, might be taking more advantage of that. So you might notice, even though there's a lot of activity and a lot of birds are on the move for migration still, we are in a time where they're focusing a lot heavily on that natural food. So there's not going to be as much focus on the feeders. So if you're noticing a slowdown in activity, it's not you, it's just this time of year. So just make sure that you're keeping your feeders only like half full and keeping them clean. And honestly, the birds will come back around as things kind of start to slow down and settle as well. In regards to migration is still kind of staying busy. I know a lot of people have noticed that their hummingbirds are gone for the season, but distance makes the heart grow fonder, so we'll see them again next year. I had the chance to do a little bit of birding last week, and I did find that there were a few of our winter birds, so ruby-crowned kinglets, white-throated sparrows, yellow-bellied sapsuckers are kind of moving into the area, which is really exciting. So keep an eye out for some of the more wintering birds that we might see this time of year. I have not heard or seen any juncos yet, so it's probably going to be a little bit longer before they pop in. But yeah, keep an eye out for that as well. It's always very exciting to see that this time of year. And with that, we're at 8:30, so we're going to go ahead and get started as well. So good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me today. My name is Jolene. I'm a certified songbird feeding specialist with Wild Birds Unlimited of Concord, and that title isn't going to help us much today because shrikes are not something that we often see at the feeders. The reason I'm talking about shrikes this time of year is because they are found in the state, but I figured it would be a fantastic bird for spooky season, and we will find out why shortly. So if you guys have any questions during the presentation, feel free to post a comment in there as well, and I will try and kind of respond to that as we go on. If not, I'll just get to it at the end of the video as well. So we're going to go ahead and just jump right into it. I am super excited for these birds. Shrikes are in the family Lanidae, which is derived from the Latin word for butcher, which we're going to talk about why a little bit shortly, but it pertains heavily to their diet. These birds are often nicknamed butcher birds. There are over 30 species found in this family, and only 2 of which are found in North America, which is super exciting. We have both the northern and the loggerhead shrike in North America. The loggerhead shrike is the one that is exclusive to North America, which is very cool, and that is the one that we have in this area. We'll be looking at their range shortly. These birds often prefer very open habitat. So for the loggerheads, often pastures with like fence rows or old orchards. So you do have some trees and some shrubs, but they like more of that kind of open style. Agricultural fields or pastures in certain areas, places with good open perching is what they're going to be looking for. Northern shrikes, as their name implies, also have more of a northern range. So they prefer more boreal habitats. So in taiga and tundra biomes, essentially. So they prefer, again, similar thing, more open habitats, few trees or shrubs, but easy to kind of observe and look for prey as well. So here are those 2 range maps. On the left, we have the northern shrike, and on the right, we have the loggerhead shrike range map. Again, the loggerhead shrike is the one that we'll be focusing on more for this presentation, just due to the fact that they are the ones that we actively see in North Carolina. Northern loggerhead shrikes are a lot of fun because they have basically 2 aspects of their range. They have a breeding range, which you can see in this kind of orange color that dips into like the Midwest and southern portion of Canada, and a lot of the Midwest in the US. And then the purple area is where you find them year round. So a lot of the kind of southern half of the US, as well as most of Mexico, which is really fun. And also they have some of their wintering range. So in the winter, they push out a little bit farther into the eastern part of Mexico as well. The yellow section on the western part of the US is their kind of migration range. So you might see them during that migration season. So oftentimes their range is kind of split. Oftentimes the northern section of the loggerheads range is going to be one that migrates. So they kind of shuffle back and forth. But it's not uncommon for those in the southern range where they stay kind of year-round to remain in a year-round habitat. So there's a mix of migration and a mix of kind of just staying where they are, depending on where they have set up their territory. Northern shrikes are interesting again, because as you can see, their wintering range is where we will usually see them, but you see a lot of their breeding habitat in a very, again, northern portion of, oh my goodness, northern portion of just in general. Of the world in general. God, I have some things together and that ain't it. So they have a very wide range, which is really cool. They have at least for like North America, they have some year-round range in Alaska and some portions of Canada as well. But there's a big jump between their breeding and their wintering habitat. Another thing that's really cool about northern shrikes is that they have winter eruptions every 3 to 6 years. So for those that don't know, obviously migration is something that happens every spring and fall as birds shuffle between nesting and wintering habitat. Eruptions are based more cyclically depending on how the growing season was for that previous year in regards to just natural resources as well as populations. So when eruptions occur, either the growing season is a little poor or the population has boomed, and basically the birds will kind of spread out much farther than their usual range. So on the northern shrikes wintering range, you might notice that they might go further south than what they usually do, or further north, depending on what's available. And this is something that can happen every 3 to 6 years. Pine siskins are another one that happens to in our area, and we might actually see some of that again this year, just because these eruptions happen every now and then, which is always really interesting, cool. And too, goodness. So when it comes to identification for shrikes, these birds are very distinct, but sometimes people can get them confused a little bit with mockingbirds. Unlike mockingbirds, these are very thick-bodied songbirds, so you'll often notice they don't really have too much of a neck. They're very stocky looking. Loggerhead shrikes got the name because loggerhead is synonymous with blockhead, so they're just kind of very stocky in general. Shrikes often have a very thick point-hooked bill as well too. So unlike mockingbirds that have kind of that longer curved bill, these birds have it very much curved, kind of like a raptor. They also have a very long, rounded tail, and they often have, goodness, we'll talk about that second. We'll talk about that part in a second. Jesus. But anyways, yeah, keep in mind they have kind of that thick-bodied look, large, blocky heads, that hooked beak, and then a longer, rounded tail. In regards to their color, these are also pretty distinct as well. They're going to have gray on the back of their head and their back body feathers as well. Oftentimes, they kind of have a brighter white throat and a kind of buffier looking breast. They have a distinct black mask that goes right over the eye. Both the loggerhead and the northern shrike have these features. And then they also have a white wing patch. Again, very similar to mockingbirds, but they kind of work with two different habitats. And then on their tail feathers, they have primarily a black tail, but they have white corners at the edges of their tail feathers when they do spread out. In regards to their song, it's a very short, both of their song and their call are very shorter styles. Again, for the song, that's something that's usually done during nesting season. It's done to kind of announce territory and attract potential mates, while calls are done throughout the year in order to talk about food resources or communicate potential threats in the area. So one is a little bit more kind of longer or fancier than the other. So in this case, both are usually pretty short. For the loggerhead shrike, they have kind of different style songs, but they're very kind of short. They're very raspy and sometimes buzzy. So this is an example of what that would sound like. So it's very kind of mechanical a little bit, but it's very short, 2 notes. And then here's another version of their song. But you'll also notice the repetition is pretty consistent between that shorter and that deeper and then upper note. And then we've also got their calls. Very short note, very kind of just that trill style, but very consistent in the repetition of it as well. So those are some things when you're looking out for shrikes, can be some things that you're keeping an ear out for when all that is going on as well. So the really cool part about shrikes is, in fact, their diet and how they eat and how they hunt. These are one of the kind of predatory songbirds that we have, and there are not many of those at all. So these birds are very opportunistic, meaning usually for at least the loggerhead, they have no problem focusing on grasshoppers, arthropods, and other insects. But depending on the season and what's available, they can also take down small amphibians, reptiles, mammals, and even other birds. Northern shrikes have a tendency to favor more rodents and birds in comparison to the loggerhead. These birds are often sit and wait predators. So, kind of similar to some of our birds of prey, they'll often pick somewhere that's kind of higher up that gives them good visuals of the landscape, and they will sit and they will wait until they find a potential prey item. In some cases, depending on where they are, they can also flash their white wing feathers to help flush out prey, similar to how mockingbirds utilize that if they're kind of foraging in a certain way. Some other interesting things about the shrikes in general is that these birds have something called a tomial tooth. So if you look at the beak, hopefully you can see this all right, they have a projection on the outer edge of their upper bill that's right here that kind of locks into an area on the lower part of their bill. And what this does is it allows the bird to kind of, for any vertebrate prey that it's going after, so such as like mammals, reptiles, or birds, they can get behind their prey and attack the nape and also sever the cervical gosh, talking is hard. Essentially, they get up behind the prey, they attack at the nape, which is the back of the neck, and they sever the cervical vertebra, killing their prey almost instantly. So, again, very similar to hawks or falcons, where they have that kind of projection on their beak as well. So that is a goodness an adaptation that helps them hunt the way that they do. Along with that, because their diet is so varied and songbirds or birds in general can't digest everything, these birds also do cast pellets. So if you ever dealt with like owls, for example, or you've ever heard of like dissecting an owl pellet, that's basically just regurgitation of prey items that could not be digested, such as like hair, bone, exoskeleton of certain insects, things like that. So shrikes will often do the same. So that is a funny photo of them doing that there as well. So both of these aspects can be found in shrikes as well. Now, the one thing that can't be found in shrikes is the fact that they do not have any talons like other birds of prey, which can cause some issues. Whenever you're dealing with hawks or other raptors, it's not so much the beak that you have to look out for, it's the talons. These are great for self-defense and holding on to a lot of prey items as these birds are on the move. So how does the shrike adapt to not having talons of its own? Because it is still a songbird. So it's a very interesting case of what's going on here. First off, instead of obviously having something to kind of attack with in regards to the talons, these birds focus more on self-defense by avoiding danger in the first place. So these birds are very good at hovering and they have no problem attacking from behind. So for example, this is one video. It's not of an actual attack, but it shows that hovering in action. This is a shrike that is behind, I'm fairly certain it might be a kestrel, but I'm not certain. Anyways, it's a bird that's a little bit larger than them. So they size it up and they realize that is not something they want to deal with. So you can see that they'll fly down, they'll pause before kind of swooping off as well. So they're very good at kind of determining what works well for them and also maneuvering pretty quickly. Here's one more. So they size up what's going on and they decide, nope, we're not dealing with that today. So super interesting to kind of see that in action. Let me see. Clear it that way. And so that is one thing that they'll utilize, especially because, again, they don't have those talons. The other issue that they run into is holding on to prey once it's killed. These birds are very good at caching, so they'll oftentimes go for a lot of food in a very little period of time, and I'll kind of like store it somewhere else. So, of course, it makes it a little bit cumbersome not to be able to kind of handle it a certain way. But essentially, these birds will pick up any larger prey by their bill and kind of fly off with it. These birds can carry prey as heavy as their own body mass, so they can definitely work with a good portion of what works well for them. Talons also usually come in handy because they help other birds hold on to their prey as they start to tear into it to get certain pieces of it. Of course, because shrikes don't have that, they have to pay heavy attention to their environment and use what they can to work with this. So essentially, what shrikes will do is they'll take some of their food items that are larger and then they can't eat in like one piece. They'll wedge it between a branch or impale it on a spine and kind of pull it apart to get pieces to tear into it. So I'm going to give a little bit of a warning. This is a video of a shrike that has the back portion of a small like rodent of some kind as it puts it onto like a piece of wood and kind of tears into it. It's an interesting behavioral video, but I know not everybody likes to see all of that. So I'm going to play it anyways, but I'm going to tell you if you're not interested in looking at that to look away, and I will let you know when the video is over. So I would look away and just listen at the moment now. For everybody else, we're going to go ahead and watch this really quick because I find it interesting. So oftentimes it's not always like, yes, they know exactly where to go. They'll kind of investigate a few different areas to see what would utilize, what they can utilize best. So in this case, even though it's not a spine on a tree, they're going to take advantage of a wood pile and basically brace it against something that allows them to kind of tear into that food item while they're working on it too. So they will take advantage of their surroundings and use what works best for them. And again, it's a really interesting behavior to watch because they're basically adapting to something that they don't have access to. And again, without those talons, it makes it harder to hold on to those food pieces. So just really interesting strategy overall. All right, we are done with that video. So you can look back if you were not a fan of looking at that video in the first place. But I find it just very interesting in general how they're able to utilize these behaviors. Not only do they take advantage of a lot of different prey items, but they'll regularly impale toxic prey as well. So things like monarch butterflies or narrow-mouthed toads that have toxins that are not quite healthy for them. They will essentially impale those prey items and wait 3 days for those toxins to erode before they take advantage of being able to eat those things as well. So they know what is safe for them and what is not. They will also basically, there are certain types of grasshoppers called lubber grasshoppers that have poison glands in their thorax. They will also discard these poison glands before they consume these grasshoppers. So this, I think, is a mix of like a learned behavior and taught behavior because there have been reports of ornithologists observing juvenile shrikes eating these things and potentially getting stunned for a hot second, but it's nothing fatal. So they learn very quickly as to what works well for them and what doesn't. So it's just really interesting to see how they're able to overcome those aspects as well. Now, kind of like how we mentioned earlier with the loggerhead shrike, depending on their range, these birds can often stay in one territory throughout the year, or they might shuffle between a wintering and a breeding habitat. But for those in year-round areas, those pairs often stay together. Both the male and the female do have territory songs, which isn't always common. Oftentimes, the male can be the one that does the most defending of a territory. So it's interesting that they both fight over it, or like they both kind of defend it, essentially. Oftentimes, when they set up the territory, they very rarely fight over the boundaries once it's been established. They're kind of all set and good to go. But despite that being the case, they do often have displays when it comes to competing with potential outside threats to their territory. They can do some mobbing, obviously, if we're dealing with like large birds of prey or things like that. But when it comes to other shrikes, they can often threaten each other with like vocalizations or flutter displays. They can do a lot of loud stamping on flat surfaces. And oftentimes, once again, kind of similar, there's a similar behavior I've seen in mockingbirds, where basically two shrikes will kind of face off and they'll kind of face away for a second before turning to each other and kind of bowing and showing off their feathers. And it occurs kind of multiple times until one of the males decides to take off and the other is declared the victor. So while this isn't quite that behavior, this is more, I think, of a courtship behavior. This is two shrikes, one of which showing off behaviors that show off the tail feathers and the different kind of strategies as well. So you could see kind of what that bowing motion looks like in these shrikes. You can see that the tail feathers are exposed. There is some calling that occurs, but the wind in the background of this video isn't really kind of worth sharing. But yeah, you could see kind of a lot of what that movement might look like when shrikes are performing certain behaviors like this. Now, something else that is interesting about shrikes is that these birds will nest earlier than other songbirds. Um, Best guess from me essentially would be the fact that when they do nest and all of their fledgling are set and good to go, that might be prime time where there's a lot of younger mammals or reptiles or potentially other songbirds that these birds can take advantage of, as well as like grasshoppers and stuff in general. So just prime time for resources. But essentially, when they get started, both the male and the female will look for a nesting site. And they're not necessarily super picky. The main things that they're looking for is that they're focusing on very heavy cover and protection. So oftentimes these nests are hidden below like the crowns of trees, and there can be often be built in thorny vegetation. But like large wide branches or things like that are totally fine for them to work with as long as it's well hidden. The female is the one that builds the nest, and it takes anywhere from like 6 to 11 days. And as you can see with this picture, there's a lot of, it's a very open, bulky cup nest with lots of twigs and bark strips and rootlets on the outside, while on the inside, it's lined with like annual flowers, moss, feathers, fur, so it's much softer on the inside as well. Something that's really cool about northern shrikes, because again, they live in more cooler climates, they will build a nest that's usually super deep and well insulated, that when the female sits in the nest, oftentimes all you see is like the end of her tail, which I find to be really interesting as well. Sometimes they do reuse old nests, whether it's theirs or another bird's, and they'll just kind of build on top of it as they're getting ready for that nesting season as well. These birds can have anywhere from 1 to 2 broods. Loggerheads can have 5 to 6 eggs in a brood, while northern shrikes can have 4 to 9. So varies with species as well. Oftentimes we're dealing with kind of closer to 1.5 months, depending on like the species, 1 to 1.5 months of incubating those eggs, and then eventually having them hatch and then kind of caring for them from there. Oftentimes, when these birds do finish fledging, they don't leave the nest site quite yet. They're still kind of getting the use of how to fly and all that kind of stuff too, so they remain by the nest site for 1 week as the parents feed them in that location before they actively fledge and kind of leave the nest site. Something that I find really cool at this age is when you often see the young starting to figure out how to do the things they should quote unquote know how to do. Some stuff is instinctual, but a lot of it is taught or learned behaviors. So with fledglings, there's often a lot of practice with like play behaviors that can often be found in raptors as well. They will often peck and carry sticks, feathers, and other inanimate objects. This time they're kind of like slowly figuring out how to catch beetles and grasshoppers. They'll practice aerial chasing. Whether or not there is a goal at the end of that aerial chasing is like to be determined. And they often sometimes chase the parents in flight while calling, all a part of that kind of play behavior. When they're about 20 to 25 days old, this is when they start to grab objects and touch them to branches and successfully wedge the items between like the crooks of branches or begin trying to impale things around like 1 month old as well. So that's that time frame where they start to kind of learn how to do that. Something that's really cool is watching these behaviors in general. So this is a juvenile shrike. Oftentimes, juvenile shrikes have like kind of a buffier breast, so their feathers don't always look as sleek in comparison to the adults, but other than that, they do look very similar. In this video, this one has a little feather that it's kind of taken and is kind of tapping against the branch as it's trying to figure out how it wants to do things. Again, you can see there's a lot of thought behind where they want to put it or how it's working or what works best. Which I always find fun because you can just see the little wheels turning. And again, it's not always successful, it's not always easy, but that's a part of like the learning behavior for a lot of juvenile birds as well too. So in this case, I'm gonna let this video. Oh, and in this case, he wasn't super successful. That feather took off without him, but it was definitely a very good attempt as well too. So by the time that these fledglings are about 40 days old, they are capable of attacking and killing vertebrate prey with all of that practice that they've been kind of putting into motion before them. So obviously these are birds we are not going to get at the feeders. That's not really one that we'll have unless you live in a very open area where shrikes can be found. Oftentimes they can be found in those pastures or farmlands with thorny trees, shrubs, or barbed wire fences. Areas, again, that they can perch or potentially utilize as caching sites. There has been some decline in their habitat and their overall population in the state due to due to a variety of things, loss of farmland, forest succession, cleaner farming practices, which don't always allow for those thorny shrubs or things to be in the area, use of pesticides, which does decrease the overall population of prey items that they can utilize, or disease in certain aspects as well too. So this is actually, because again, they're not really found in our backyard all the time. I wanted to show some ways that people can look for certain species of birds in our area if you're ever curious about seeing a shrike or other birds you may not see again at the feeders. So a few different resources that you can utilize is, at least for the state of North Carolina, sorry for those that are outside of it, I'm not too sure. Some of these you can use, but in the case for those in North Carolina, ncbirds.carolinabirdclub.org. It's a very cool website that shows the historic and current range of a lot of different species that have been in the state. It is a compendium that has a lot of good information. It kind of sorts by common name or scientific name. So I'm just going to look up loggerhead shrike to make that easier. It shows all the birds listed under L. And it has really good information, general comments, where you can find these species in like the coastal areas, the Piedmont areas, or the mountains, as well as finding tips too. So this is where I got that map to show you where they were former breeders, where they are most common, where they're kind of common, where they're possibly found. Excuse me. So you can find there are certain areas in the Piedmont where you can definitely find them. It just depends on the habitat and potentially the time of year. So that is one really cool resource you can check out. For those all around the world in general, ebird.org is a fantastic source that shows recent sightings depending on what you're looking for. You can find data for specific areas. So if I wanted to look for North Carolina specifically, I could find that in eBird. It also shows a general range map of where you can find these birds in general once that loads, or what the sightings have been like. And that's just in general. Shows top photos, top audio if you want to check any of that out as well, and top videos too. So lots of different ways to utilize eBird. That's where you can also update your birding lists. And you can also look for, if you want to be alerted when a certain species in the area, you can find those alerts on eBird as well and kind of keep track of what's going on and who's cool in the passing through in the state as well. And that's in general for anybody around the world. So you can look at that, and that's a very good resource to handle in general. Lastly, for those that, again, in North Carolina, is the NC Birding Trail. So if you're not sure where to get started, not sure where to check things out, this is a very cool website that lists a lot of very good places to do some birding. We are in the Concord area, so like obviously it lists Frank Lisk Park. It talks about like the description of the area, the birds you could potentially find. It also talks about what's recently seen nearby. So again, lots of cool stuff to check out. Talks about the habitat you can find, hours, things like that. So wonderful website and resource, especially if you're looking to kind of branch out and try some new places to do some birding as well. So I highly recommend any of those resources. Definitely feel free to check those out when you have the time as well. So with that being said, that's all I have to say about the shrikes today. These little butcher birds I thought would be a great option for spooky season, so I had no qualms with talking about them. They're a lot of fun. Once again, all the resources came from Macaulay Library at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, Birds of the World, or in regards to that last image, the birds of North Carolina, their distribution and abundance, which is really awesome. So it just shows those various maps and ranges. Allaboutbirds.org is a great resource if you want to look for something that's kind of easy to read, easily digestible, has all of their sound, photos, different things like that listed as well too. So lots of great and easy resources to pick from if you're ever interested. For those that are in the area and potentially looking to shop today, just remember to mention Shrike at the counter. Basically, we have a coupon code for $5 off a $25 purchase or more, available today either through in-store or phone order as well. We'll be doing a second viewing of this presentation in-store at 11 a.m., and I will be moving this presentation over to our YouTube channel in the event that you want to share this with somebody that does not have a Facebook page as well. But with that being said, I hope you guys have a wonderful time. Thank you so much for joining me today. Hope you learned a lot, and I will see you next month. Thank you guys. You have a good one, and I'll see you then.